For decades, one thing inside NATO felt almost untouchable: American military dominance. The fighter jets, the surveillance aircraft, the software systems, the battlefield networks, the logistics chains, almost everything seemed to orbit around Washington. But now, something unusual is happening. Quietly, slowly, and then suddenly, NATO countries are asking a question that would have sounded almost impossible just 10 years ago. What if depending too much on America is becoming a strategic risk? This question is no longer just a theory discussed by defense analysts. It is now appearing in real defense decisions, billion-dollar procurement debates, and aircraft programs that could reshape the future of air power. From Canada's F-35 hesitation, to Saab's growing influence, to Boeing's surveillance setback, and now South Korea's KF-21 entering the global fighter conversation, one thing is becoming clear: NATO's next decade may not be American only. It may be diversified, contested, and far more unpredictable than anyone expected. The biggest change is not only about aircraft, it is about control. For years, the logic inside NATO was simple: buy American, stay integrated, and stay protected. American systems were seen as the safest and most advanced choice. But after the war in Ukraine, rising defense costs, political uncertainty in the United States, and growing concern over military supply chains, many NATO countries are beginning to think differently. They are no longer asking only which aircraft is the most advanced. They are asking who controls the software, who controls the spare parts, who controls the upgrades, who can delay deliveries, and who can say yes or no during a crisis.
That is where the old model begins to crack. NATO members are not rejecting America, but they are clearly looking for more options. European countries want faster delivery, lower costs, stronger local industry, and more national control. This is why South Korea has become such an important new player in the defense market. South Korea is not only selling weapons, it is selling speed, production capacity, industrial partnership, and political flexibility. Countries like Poland, Romania, Estonia, Finland, and others have looked toward Korean defense systems because they often arrive faster, cost less, and include more industrial cooperation than many traditional Western offers. This shift is not just about tanks, artillery, or rocket systems. It is now entering the world of strategic aircraft, and that brings us to Boeing. For decades, NATO's airborne warning and control identity was tied to Boeing's E-3 AWACS. These aircraft were the alliance's eyes in the sky, watching airspace, tracking threats, coordinating missions, and warning commanders before danger arrived. Naturally, many people expected Boeing's E-7 Wedgetail to become the obvious replacement, but that assumption is now under pressure. The E-7 remains a powerful aircraft, but delays, rising costs, and uncertainty around American procurement have created doubts. When even the United States sends mixed signals about its own future surveillance aircraft plans, allies begin asking uncomfortable questions. Why should NATO fully commit to a platform if Washington itself is still debating its future? This is why Saab's GlobalEye has become so important. GlobalEye is not just another aircraft. It represents a different political message. It offers modern radar capability, lower operating costs, and a stronger European and Canadian industrial story.
Canada's movement towards Saab GlobalEye is a major signal. Canada is not simply buying a surveillance aircraft. It is telling the world that Arctic defense, national industry, and strategic independence now matter more than automatic loyalty to American defense giants. This decision also shows that Boeing is no longer guaranteed to win simply because it is Boeing. The defense market is becoming more competitive, and NATO countries are becoming more careful about long-term dependency. But the most dramatic part of this entire story is Canada's fighter jet debate. Canada agreed to buy 88 F-35 fighter jets to replace its aging CF-18 fleet. On paper, the F-35 makes sense. It is stealthy, networked, battle-tested, and deeply connected with American and allied military systems. But politics,
costs, and sovereignty concerns have changed the mood. Canada is now reviewing the full F-35 plan, and the real question is not whether the F-35 is advanced. Of course it is advanced. The real question is whether Canada can afford to place its entire future fighter fleet inside a system controlled so heavily by another country. This is where Saab's Gripen E becomes interesting. The Gripen is not stealthier than the F-35, and it is not marketed as a direct replacement for fifth-generation capability. But it offers something different: operational independence, easier maintenance, dispersed operations, local industrial options, and more national control over software and support. For a country like Canada, with massive Arctic territory and growing concern about sovereignty, that argument is powerful.
In my opinion, Canada will find it very difficult to completely walk away from the F-35. The aircraft is deeply tied to NORAD, NATO interoperability, U.S. integration, and future air combat networks. A mixed fleet may sound attractive politically, but it would also create problems in training, maintenance, logistics, and long-term cost. Still, even if Canada stays with the F-35, the debate itself has already changed the conversation. It proves that America's defense monopoly is no longer unquestioned. And now comes the wild card: South Korea's KF-21 Boramae. The KF-21 is not just another fighter jet. It is South Korea's announcement to the world that it wants to move from being a weapons buyer to becoming a major weapons power. The aircraft is designed as a 4.5-generation fighter with modern sensors, reduced radar visibility, advanced weapons integration, and lower operating costs than many fifth-generation platforms. It is not trying to replace the F-35 directly, and that is exactly what makes it so interesting. The KF-21 could become the aircraft that works besides stealth fighters. A country could buy a smaller number of expensive F-35s for high-risk missions, while using larger numbers of KF-21s for air defense, patrol, interception, and multi-role operations. This mixed fleet idea is becoming more attractive because defense budgets are not unlimited. Every Air Force wants advanced capability, but not every country can afford an all-stealth fleet, especially when maintenance, upgrades, software access, and sustainment are included.
This is where the KF-21 could become dangerous to the old market order. If South Korea offers fast delivery, technology transfer, local production, and competitive pricing, then countries searching for alternatives may start listening very seriously. The KF-21 does not need to defeat the F-35 to change the market. It only needs to become good enough, affordable enough, and independent enough to give countries another serious option. That is the real story here. NATO is not abandoning America, and saying that would be an exaggeration. The United States remains the most powerful defense supplier in the alliance. The F-35 remains the most important fighter program in the Western world. American systems still dominate networks, logistics, weapons, and strategy. But dominance is not the same as monopoly, and monopoly is exactly what is being challenged. Saab is rising, South Korea is expanding, Canada is reviewing, Europe is rethinking, Boeing is no longer guaranteed. And the F-35, while still unmatched in many areas, is now being judged not only as a fighter jet, but also as a political dependency. That is why the future of NATO air power will not be decided only by stealth, speed, or radar range. It will be decided by control. Control over software, control over supply chains, control over upgrades, control over national industry, control over wartime decisions. These issues are becoming just as important as aircraft performance. A fighter jet is no longer just a machine in the sky. It is part of a political, industrial, and technological system. Whoever controls that system controls the future of the aircraft.
My conclusion is simple. NATO is entering a new era of defense independence. If countries diversify wisely, the alliance could become stronger, more flexible, and less vulnerable to political shocks. But if diversification becomes fragmented, expensive, and poorly coordinated, NATO could face new problems in interoperability and readiness. The challenge is not just to buy different weapons. The challenge is to build a stronger defense ecosystem without weakening the unity of the alliance. So the question is not whether America is losing NATO. The real question is whether NATO is learning to stand on more than one industrial leg. And that may be the biggest transformation of all. Canada's F-35 debate, Saab's rise, Boeing's pressure, and South Korea's KF-21 all point toward the same future, a NATO that still needs America but no longer wants to depend on America alone. Now, I want to ask you, should Canada stay fully committed to the F-35, or should it seriously consider alternatives like the Gripen E? Could the KF-21 become the next major challenger in the global fighter market? And is NATO becoming stronger through diversification or weaker by moving away from American systems? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep analysis on fighter jets, air power, defense technology, and the future of NATO, subscribe to Skyjet Wings and turn on notifications, because the next air power revolution may already be underway.